Hello everybody, the name's Chaz Addison and I'm your host of the Flashin podcast. Before I get into anything, I want to give a special shout out to everyone who checked out the podcast last week, especially all my Redditors over on R Arrow and R Flash TV. A lot of you guys gave me some great feedback and seemed to really enjoy the podcast, and I really thank you guys for that. And sadly, I was having some issues with SoundCloud, so I wasn't able to get the MP3 up on there. But like I said in last week's episode, the podcast will always be available on YouTube, and I will always post the links in those two subreddits at least. I might start posting it in the DC TV subreddit, just for more people to know about the podcast, because like I said, this is only the second episode ever, and it might take a while for this to get off the ground, but I'm really enjoying doing it, and I think this week is going to be a huge improvement over last week. But again, I want to thank everyone who gave it a listen. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this podcast, because we all love the same thing, and that's what this podcast is supposed to do. It's supposed to bring all these great fans of these two excellent TV shows together. So, jumping right into it, The Flash, Season 1, Episode 4, titled Going Rogue. A quick synopsis of the episode. The Flash stops a robbery, but the culprits get away after shooting a guard, and the Flash chooses to save the man instead of following the criminals. Joe shows Barry a book of suspects, and Barry identifies Leonard Snart, played by Wentworth Miller, as the leader of the group. While investigating the case, Barry gets a surprise visit from an old friend, Felicity Smoke, who we all love from Arrow. She heard about his new abilities and came to check them out for herself. She joins him at Star Labs to help stop Snart after it's revealed that Snart has gotten his hands on a stolen cold gun which could kill the Flash. Dr. Wells is furious when he finds out that Cisco built the cold gun without telling anyone, and now it's missing. Meanwhile, Iris is getting the silent treatment from Joe because of her relationship with Eddie. Finally, the Flash and Captain Cold have an epic confrontation. Now, this might be a reoccurring trend of this podcast, but I really enjoyed this episode. I think this might have been my favorite episode of this series so far. It just hit its stride from the very beginning, and it didn't slow down, and before I knew it, the entire hour of TV had gone. That's when you can tell you have a really good episode, is when the whole hour just flies by. But let's get into some specifics of what I thought about this episode. The episode starts out on a really cool scene of Barry working on his multitasking skills. He's playing Operation with Caitlin, playing ping pong with Cisco, and playing chess with Dr. Wells. And I just thought, seeing those four doing something a little bit more lighthearted and having some fun was really refreshing. Then Barry goes and stops a heist, and instantly I noticed the Kondak reference, which, if you're not aware, that's a Easter egg leading towards Shazam, although I surely doubt Shazam is going to be in the TV show because they're working on a Shazam movie, and it's pretty obvious that DC is keeping the TV universe and the movie universe separate, but I'd be interested to see Shazam in the show. It'd be very interesting to see how the CW pulls that off. And again in this episode, we see Barry using his powers in a new, unique way when he's flipping through the book of all the arrests and he picks out Leonard Snart. It's just really cool to see Barry using his powers in different ways, and it seems like every week he's kind of learning this new way to use his abilities, and that's something I really like, because the Flash is so OP once he learns what he can actually do, and Barry is just starting to learn what he can do, which is exciting. One of the best things about this episode was Captain Cold, played by Wentworth Miller. Also, he was in Prison Break. I think he did a great job. Captain Cold is one of the Flash's biggest villains, and I was super happy to see that he wasn't killed or he wasn't put in the meta-human prison. And one of my favorite things about Captain Cold is there's just so many pun opportunities. I mean, the guy's just calm, cool, and collected. Get it? But seriously, the dude is great. I love the actor, I love the character, and I'm super excited to see what they do with him in the future. Another thing I want to point out is the special effects are on point again in this episode, and I'm not sure how they are pulling off these effects on a CW budget. The effects look amazing for a TV show, probably some of the best effects, well, not probably, the best effects I've seen on a television show that I can remember recently. And it's just great to see how cool everything looks. There are some parts that don't look as good as others. Overall, they just look great. And Detective Joe, played by Jesse Martin, continues to be the best actor on the show by far. And whenever he's in a scene, he just makes whoever's in that scene way better. He's the best actor on the show, and it's amazing to see what he can do on screen. I really love the character. Really hope nothing happens to Detective Joe, but we'll never know. Another thing about this episode is I thought it was really funny. Probably the funniest episode so far. And I really enjoy the comedy and the lightheartedness of this show. It's different than Arrow in that aspect, where Arrow is definitely more dark and grounded, when The Flash is more lighthearted and very not grounded. So it's good that they're not the same. They're not super similar. I was worried when The Flash was first starting up and when I was first hearing about it that it would just be Arrow with a different character, but I like where they're going, and I like that they're not really holding back from all the craziness, because what's the point in holding back when you have the Flash? But one of the best parts of this episode was having Felicity there. Now, Felicity is one of my favorite characters on Arrow, and I knew she was going to be in the Flash, and this is the first time we see her in the Flash, and she just fit right in with the Star Labs crew and Barry, and I'm just really, really hoping that she becomes a regular in the show. I'm not sure if that's really possible with her being pretty busy, filming Arrow. It'd be kind of hard for her to film 2 TV shows at once. I really hope we see her more this season and more through the series. She really works well with the Star Labs crew. She kind of fangirled about Dr. Wells for a moment, and Dr. Wells kind of fangirled about her, saying that she was very impressive. Number 2 in her class, I believe is what he said. It's cool to see them meshing and meeting, even though we know Cisco and Catelyn already know Felicity. Now that everything's kind of getting into motion, it's really cool to see them all working together. We also got to see Dr. Wells being super mad at Cisco for building the cold gun, and I really like those scenes. I wouldn't say it showed a different side of Dr. Wells, because every episode up to this point, at the very end, we saw Dr. Wells being fucking, I don't even know what, super angry. It was interesting to see him being angry towards Cisco, because usually him, Cisco, and Catelyn together, they're all super happy about things. It was cool to see Dr. Wells doing everything he can to make sure that Barry stays safe. When Barry finds out that Cisco made the gun, he gets very angry about the whole situation, about that Cisco would make the gun and everything. And at first, I kind of thought Barry was being a baby, specifically when he turned off his earpiece. Come on, Cisco, he didn't know that you were you, and he was just trying to, in case something happened with this red streak, he wanted to be able to stop it if he needed to. He obviously didn't think that the gun would get into the wrong hands. But Felicity kind of talks Barry down from his anger. Barry's going to have to learn that he can't save everyone, and that's going to be tough for him, because he wants to be able to save everyone, obviously. And him watching that guy die right in front of him was really hard on him, and you could tell that it took a toll on him, and he was really angry at Cisco about it. But I'm glad they worked it out towards the end of the episode, and they're not still angry at each other, because that would have kind of just broken up the Star Labs crew, and I really like them all being happy and on the same page. Felicity mentioned the salmon ladder and watching Arrow and watching Oliver do the salmon ladder, and I just thought that was super funny, because salmon ladder is kind of like a meme of Arrow, and I don't know, I just thought it was cool that it was mentioned here on The Flash. I want to see Barry do the salmon ladder, come on. And like I said earlier, Felicity really works well with the Flash team. I'm saying Flash team instead of Team Flash. I think that sounds a little better. The Star Labs team is kind of too long of a name. I think I'm going to go with Flash team. If some of you guys have a better nickname for the team, definitely leave it below in the comments. But for now, we're going to go with Flash team. She went right into Felicity mode, helping them hack into the system, and it was just great to see them be impressed with her skills and her being able to help Barry. And like I said earlier, when Barry turned off his earpiece, I thought he was kind of being like a baby, because you're going into battle, you need to be able to talk to your team, and turning off your earpiece just seems super irresponsible in case you need to talk to them. I mean, he could turn it on at any point, but just him turning it off but eventually Barry gets over it. But then we get to the epic final battle of Captain Cold versus the Flash. And one thing I wanted to mention, if you watch the episode again, Captain Cold just straight up walks onto a fully moving train, and he's not a metahuman, so I'm not exactly sure how he did that, but that just confused me for a second. I really enjoyed the train scene between Captain Cold and the Flash. When Barry was kind of going in and out saving everyone, it reminded me of the memorable train scene in Spider-Man 2. So I really enjoyed that scene. Barry was able to save everyone, and the effects were really good on that scene. But eventually, Captain Cold freezes Barry again, and Cisco, Caitlin, and Felicity save Barry with the vacuum cleaner, which I thought was pretty hilarious. That's just one of the quirky things that this show can pull off that I don't think would really work in Arrow, and I really enjoyed that. And we heard Cisco call Captain Cold, and he kind of grinned when he heard that, and I really liked that because you could tell he liked the name, and he's going to really use that persona, and Captain Cold is just a really cool name, a really cool villain, and like I said earlier, I'm really excited to see where he goes for the rest of the season. At the very end of the episode, we were teased with Heatwave, which we knew were coming, but it's just cool to see that they're getting in motion. I actually thought Heatwave was going to be in this episode more, but he should be in the next episode. And finally, the last thing I have to say about this episode is we had the Baricity scene in the train at the end. And yes, I said Baricity. It's just way easier than saying Barry and Felicity. Baricity. I mean, I'm not really into shipping people, but that's what the CW kind of does, and that's kind of what us fans make up names for, so I'm going to use it. But anyway, I really enjoyed that scene between those two. I say this all the time, but those two have a really good chemistry together, and they finally kissed. Woohoo, CW, making everyone into relationships. But I really think those two characters work out together, and them being in a relationship is totally fine with me. I think it works, so that's awesome. But overall, guys, like I said, I really enjoyed this episode of The Flash. Probably my favorite, like I said, and I'm super looking forward to the next episode. It just sucks we have to wait a week for it. Moving over to this week's episode of Arrow, Season 3, Episode 4, titled The Musician. Quick synopsis. A furious Nyssa confronts Oliver about Sarah. When Oliver learns Malcolm Merlyn is alive, he suspects Merlyn killed Sarah. Oliver and Nyssa join forces and go after the Dark Archer, intent on bringing Sarah's killer to justice. Laurel keeps her distance from Nyssa as she blames her sister's death on her involvement with the League of Assassins. Meanwhile, Oliver and Roy work on repairing their respective relationships with Thea, who has returned home. Nyssa discusses Oliver with her father, Ra's al Ghul. Now, I'm going to be honest, this is definitely my least favorite episode of the season so far, and I couldn't really put my finger on it after watching it once, but I watched it again, and it just felt like everything was all over the place. I don't know why I felt that way. I just can't put my finger on why I didn't enjoy this episode, because I was super hyped for this episode, knowing that we'd finally get to see what Ra's al Ghul looks like in this universe. I was super excited about that. I was super excited about seeing Nyssa again, because I thought she was one of the best characters that they introduced in the entire series last season. But I'm not just going to drag on about that. Let me get into the specifics of the episode. So one of the things I really enjoy that this show is doing this season is they definitely did not gloss over the death of Sarah. A lot of TV shows, if a main character dies, people kind of just move on rather quickly. The death of Sarah seems to be what this entire season is about at this point. And I really like that they're not just glossing over her death, because she was a fan favorite character. I really enjoyed her. And it's sad to see her go, but I'm glad to see that they're not just glossing over her. Like I said, Nyssa is back, and she's just as good as ever. I think her character is amazing. I love the actress that portrays her. I don't have her name on hand. I apologize for that, and I'm excited to be able to hopefully see her more for the rest of the season. So the flashbacks in this episode show Oliver kind of doing his work finally for Amanda Waller. He's kind of been disagreeing with that entire operation this entire time, but he's finally getting to work, and he's actually a bounty killer for Waller, which is definitely not the direction I expected these flashbacks to be going. However, I think it did a really good job showing why Oliver doesn't want to kill people anymore, because in the past he's obviously killed so many people and he feels bad about it, so that's a good way to show why Oliver is so against killing people these days. One of my biggest disappointments in this episode is Laurel. She was super aggravating to me in this episode. She's just going around bitching at Oliver why he won't kill Merlyn, even though you don't even know if Merlyn actually killed Sarah, and I'm pretty sure he didn't, because, I don't know, you just get that vibe from him that he didn't kill her. But she's mad at Oliver for not killing Merlyn when she doesn't even have the guts to tell her own father that his daughter died. Like, get the fuck out of here. I was really enjoying the Laurel character the first few episodes of this season, but this episode, she was just on my nerves. the entire episode. I did not enjoy the Laurel character this episode. They had that big scene when we finally see Merlin in Starling City again at that monk's home. And I really enjoyed that scene, but one thing I need to say is Diggle really needs an outfit or something to cover his face at least, because he just stuck out like a sore thumb compared to Oliver, Roy, and Nisa, who are all in full costume. Diggle needs something else, not just a leather jacket and pants. He needs something else. I'm really loving how much we're seeing John Barrowman this season. He's one of my favorite actors in the show, and he's great. He makes it hard to hate him, even though you really want to. He's just so lovable, and he has that smirk, and I don't know why. I just really enjoy him as a character. And there was this scene between Oliver and Thea towards the middle of the episode in a coffee shop, and I'm about 95% sure that it's the same coffee shop that Iris works at in the Flash. If you guys notice this, let me know if you think it's the same coffee shop. It has the same layout, and if you look outside the doors, it looks like the same setting outside. So I'm pretty sure they filmed that in the same area. I mean, they both film in Canada, and I'm pretty sure they both film in Vancouver, so it makes sense. But that was just something that I caught. We got another Ferris Air reference, and this seems like the 1,000th time that they've referenced Ferris Air in the show, and I just finally want to see Hal Jordan in the show. He doesn't need to become Green Lantern or anything, but I think we really should just show Hal Jordan just for that fan service, you know? Once Nisa finds out that Merlin is Thea's father, she goes ahead and kidnaps her, and Roy tries to be badass and do some totally unnecessary flips, and he gets put to sleep by Nisa, because, I mean, Roy cannot compete with someone who is trained in the League of Assassins. But I saw a lot of people on our Arrows saying, why didn't Thea at least try to fight Nisa? I mean, she's been trained by Merlin for however many months, 5 months, and they didn't, I don't know if they didn't catch it, but Thea, she, gets in her position to kind of be guarded, and then she looks back and Roy is still awake, and she can't let Roy know that she's been trained at all, so she kind of just has to let Nisa take her, and I like that they kind of showed that to show that she's ready to protect herself, but she just can't because Roy is still there. One of my favorite scenes of the entire episode was the big fight between Ollie, Nisa, and Merlin. I just thought the choreography of that fight was awesome, and that part where Nisa, it looked like she was catching Merlin's arrows with her cloth thing, I thought that was super sick, and that entire fight scene was just amazing. And for some reason, it's still weird for me to hear Thea calling Merlin dad. I mean, he's her dad, but it's just odd for me to hear her say that. And the last thing I have to say about this episode, we finally get to see the home of the assassins, and I've been waiting for this moment since I heard about it, but we finally get to see Ra's al Ghul, and the guy's voice, I don't have the name of the actor on hand, and again, I apologize, but his voice is just, it's perfect. It's so menacing, but still so calm at the same time, and I think he looks so good. He looks very similar to Liam Neeson when he played Ra's al Ghul, which, I mean, I guess isn't a bad thing, because I really liked Liam Neeson's version of Ra's al Ghul. But I cannot be more excited for Ra's al Ghul to make his way to Starling City. I think that is going to be amazing, and it's going to be very odd to see Merlin and Oliver fighting alongside of each other, because that kind of seems in the direction that they're going to be going. So that's pretty much all my thoughts I had for this episode. Not as many, because like I said, I wasn't a huge fan of the episode, but that's just my opinion. I would love to hear your opinion on the episode. Every once in a while, there's an episode of Arrow that comes out that just doesn't click with me, and I think this is one of those episodes. But overall, guys, thanks for listening. A quick recap, I loved Flash, and I still loved Arrow. Definitely subpar to last week's episode, I would say. But surprisingly, next week we have Arrow but no Flash, which sucks because I obviously want to see more Flash because I'm loving Flash more and more every week. But I really thought the two series would kind of stay neck and neck. Episode 8 of both this season is supposed to be the big crossover. So I'm assuming in the near future there will be a week with Flash and no Arrow. But like I said, next week, no Flash, all Arrow. So next week's Flash and Arrows podcast will just be an Arrows podcast. So I guess look forward to that. It's going to be a shorter episode, of course, because it's only half the content to talk about. But like I said, only Arrow next week, which sucks. But the creators of The Flash definitely earned their week off, I think. So thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you taking your time to listen. Definitely leaving some feedback. You could either leave it in the comment thread on Reddit of where I posted this, or, of course, on the YouTube video where you're watching this. So, thanks for listening. I'm Chaz Addison. I'll see you guys next week. Well, you guys will hear my voice next week, I guess I should say. I will talk to you guys next week. Thanks.